This conference will now be recorded.
All right, good morning, everyone. Switch slides and those online. Can't see how many we've got, but okay, we'll just deal with that. That's right. All right, so I want you all to raise a hand if you've ever had an injury that required some form of rehabilitation. Oh yeah, looks like most of the room, doesn't it? And if you didn't raise your hand, well, lucky you guys. And so it's obviously quite a common thing, and it can be from obviously lots of different areas. There might be an accidental fall. You might have had a twist or a sprain from a sports game. You might have had a niggle from doing something the wrong way. It might be due to your work or just your everyday life. And I'm sure most of you know I'm a physiotherapist, and so I've kind of had some thoughts around rehab and sort of maybe spiritual lessons we can learn from that. And so I've titled this From Pain to Purpose, and spiritual lessons from the journey of physiotherapy. I've also based it off a little podcast that I listened to, which they pretty much had a physical therapist, which is what the Americans call physios, and they kind of went through like an 8-step process around injuries and got some lessons from that, and that was an interesting listen, and kind of taken a few of their ideas and expanded them a little bit, and a few ideas of my own, and condensed it a little bit because 8 steps was way too much. So we're going for 7, so that's better. All right, so step 1 is the injury phase. So was this an accident and it happened suddenly? Was this pain developing over time? Was this pain always there, but you've just got on with your life? And so the first step is knowing you're injured. And so I'm sure, you know, when something's happened and you might be like, I think it's all good, we'll just wait and see what happens. I'm sure you've obviously said that yourself or heard someone say that. And there's obviously some telltale signs, you know, like the pain, obviously pain, maybe the swelling, bruising, things like that, to kind of prompt you to do something about it, or to look to get help. And so I guess the first step is acknowledging that there is something wrong there. And so, all right, I can't see what's coming up, so let me just do that. So in terms of spiritual injuries, so let's just, maybe it's a weakness in our character. It might be a sin that we can't sort of get over, or maybe we're stuck in the cycle of doing it. Maybe it's a wrong we feel someone has done to us, or we've done to someone, and something like that. It could be one of these from Proverbs 6, the famous Proverbs 6:16 to 19. There are 6 things that the Lord hates, even 7 things that are an abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift to run to evil, a false witness who pours out lies, and a person who spreads discord among family members. It could be one of them. Obviously, it's some of them are quite full on, but as we said, it could be any of those things that we talked about earlier as well. And so the first step is knowing that something isn't right. And so like a physical injury as well, we can say that, yeah, it might be all good. Let's hope for the best and see if we can get over it. And I've gone for the anger example. That's going to be my example for everyone. Just not sure why. And so you might say that, oh, I'm not angry all the time and I'm working on it. But I think that's the, I guess, yeah, needing to acknowledge it, and then what are we're going to see what we can do about that. In Hebrews 12, we read, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, we must get rid of every weight and the sin that clings so closely, and run with endurance the race set out for us, keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. And so like an athlete not wanting to carry an injury around when they're doing sort of competition or an event, or just anyone really not wanting to have an injury, we too don't want to be carrying something that's going to hinder us on our spiritual journey along the way. And so step one is we need to be aware of ourselves and know and acknowledge when we are spiritually injured. Step two is asking for help. Once we know we have an injury and it might look serious, then we're gonna likely seek some form of help. So this could be going to your doctor, the A&E, a physio, maybe a chiro, an osteo, lots of probably other ones around there. Or you might leave it to yourself and ask Dr. Google, and lots of people do that, which is fine as well. And so once we have recognized our spiritual journey, we need to have the humility to seek the guidance and ask for help. And so we're gone, our first port of call is prayer, prayer to God, and then we're going to read his word, and then we'd likely ask maybe a close friend, then maybe a family member or someone we look up to. Hebrews 4:16 reads, "Therefore, let us confidently approach the throne of grace to receive mercy and find grace whenever we need help." So we must draw near with confidence to God, asking him for help and knowing that help will come, but in God's way and not our own. And so one important things in dealing with patients in healthcare is that sort of patient buy-in. So you got to earn their trust. And if you don't get it early on, then it can affect the treatment like right from the start, and it can lead to, I guess, worse outcomes potentially in the long run. And so likewise, when asking for help or being the person that someone comes to us for help, we need to be trusted and also learn to trust others with our problems. Famous words in James 5:16. So confess your sins to one another and pray for one another so that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person has great effectiveness. And so do we share our spiritual injuries with each other? And this can often begin the relief sort of process. And often when talking out loud, we might actually figure out the solution as we speak. And I guess this is what I try and do every day to save me some time in explaining things. We try and get the patient to sort of get that light bulb moment to figure out so they can understand the injury. And then it's like they've come up with the process themselves. And then that saves me some explaining to do. And then it, I guess, helps them out in terms of their own self-fulfilling that. So once we have identified our spiritual journey, we then need to, step two is ask for help. Step three we have is evaluation. So this is where I'll get information from the patient about their history, maybe some facts about their life, I guess what they do for work, what their hobbies are, things like that. And then maybe do some tests to see what the problem is, and then sort of make plans for the weeks ahead. And so common questions I might ask, I'm sure people have asked you these things like, I know, when did your injury start? Is it getting better or worse over time? What have you identified to make it better or worse? Like what things that you identified that made it better or worse? Have you tried anything yourself at home to help it out already? And so the spiritual side leaps out, doesn't it? When did this spiritual injury start? Is it getting better or worse? What things make it better or worse? And what have you already tried yourself to help? And so we need to, like step two, ask for help so that we can, in step three, evaluate it. And we need to be equipped to not only know who to go to, but if someone comes to us, be equipped to give them advice. You're not going to go to a mechanic for advice on your knee sprain. Well, you probably shouldn't anyway. And therefore, we need to know who the right people are to go to help us out. And so we know that God always has our back, so he's obviously always there in that prayer. And then we might need that friend to diagnose us. We might need that family member to rehab us, and then we might look for someone else to adjust us and change our life. And it might take a few tries to get it right. So if you don't succeed the first time, you might need to go to see someone else. In Galatians 6, verse 2 to 4, carry one another's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. For if anyone thinks he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. Let each one examine his own work, then he can take pride in himself and not compare himself with someone else. So once we've asked for help, we need to then evaluate it and with someone we trust. And if we do that, it will likely be a success. And obviously praying to God to ask for help along the way as well. Step 4 we have is controlling inflammation and sort of preventing the conditioning getting worse. And so once a diagnosis has been made, there's lots of different techniques that we can sort of help to settle the pain to prevent it getting worse. Oh, it does have a pointer. There we go. So we got some things. I know we could brace it, we could tape it, we could just massage, rest it, educating them. And in this stage, I guess patience is key, which is pretty hard these days because everyone wants a quick fix, and not many people have a lot of patience when they come to these sort of things. We don't want to follow instructions or rules, and so in the long run, it's going to be better if we are patient. So that's the key at this stage, I guess. An example I wrote this on Monday, but for the young people, it might be a bit fresh after our roller skating injury last night. We had a decent wrist fracture. So I wrote my example was a wrist fracture. So I hope Ollie's doing all right. So the example would be that, so let's go over here, fracture of the wrist. So you would need to put it in a cast. And what this cast does, it obviously reduces the wrist from moving, protecting it to stop it being irritated. So it leaves it in a good position to get the best healing. Okay, no, we're going too early. And so what we're trying to do here is we're trying to remove the sort of negative effects that are going to leave the wrist in the best healing environment. And so this too might mean in terms of our spiritual injury, what do we need to remove? What negative influences do we need to remove that are contributing to our problem? So it could be you might need to reduce time spent with a friend that sort of directs you away from the truth. It could be reducing time spent letting our minds like wander aimlessly. It could be, any sort of thing. And it's an active thing that we need to do to alleviate this sort of pain and this preventing of getting worse. And so this is where I'm leading to in terms of the cycle. So we have pain, and then so we rest it up, either something like that, and then we have a good nap and rest it. But then we might go and make a cup of tea, and then we're lifting the jug, and it hurts our wrist, and then we're getting pain again. And so this constant cycle of getting the inflammation and irritation. And so there needs to be a break in the cycle to make change. And so we can't expect spiritual changes if we keep on doing the same sort of thing. So how can we prevent spiritual inflammation? In James 1:26, if someone thinks he is religious, yet does not bridle his tongue, and so deceives his heart, his religion is futile. So we need to watch what we say and therefore what we think as well, which is, and so these things that are things that can contribute to the sort of the tightness, the pain, and the stress of our spiritual injury. In step 5, we have similar in terms of fixing the underlying cause of the pain. And so we settle down the pain, then we need to focus on what's actually causing it, and so that they can focus on returning the patient or the person to their full function. So we can reduce all the negative effects that we want, but we still need to address sort of the main problem. And so maybe we need to ask ourselves what the underlying cause of our spiritual injury is. Is it greed? Is it anger? Or is it lust, jealousy? There's lots of things that it could be. Isaiah 64 verse 8. Lord, you are our Father. We are the clay and you are our potter. We are all products of your labor. So I've gone with here, like, do we trust God enough to put the underlying cause of our spiritual injury in his hands for him to reshape or to remold us? And this is a big part of my day as well. I'm working like hand therapy, so we make lots of splints. And so I guess we cut out the material, we heat it up, and then we're going to go and mold it to the shape of the person's hand or their finger. And it's important to get the material into the arches and like the grooves of their hand or the finger for a nice comfortable fit. And then if we take too long, well, if I take too long, or the patient starts moving their hand like, oh, this is interesting, it's really annoying, and then I have to go heat it up again and start the whole process again. And so without the material being pliable, it's very difficult to mold it into that perfect shape. And so likewise, we need to be pliable clay for our God to work. He's not under time restriction, like I am, and he's always going to keep trying, but he needs the right material to work with. And so the question is that us? Oh, these are my good pictures. Oh, right, there we are. Okay, step 6, progression. So once we're sort of further along, we might get into some more exercises, and I guess things are going to get a bit more challenging. And so it does this because we need to progress forwards, and it means the patient needs to work harder, otherwise they'll sort of stay the same. It might, because they're working harder, it might hurt a bit more, but it is going to get easier in the long run, and it is a fine balance. We don't want to do too much too soon, but we also don't want to do not enough. And so we need to be constantly progressing through our spiritual injury. We don't want to just stagnate in the identifying stage and just keep identifying all these spiritual injuries we might have and not sort of progressing along. And so with our anger example, we might go from, we're no longer angry because they didn't return a phone call to us, or they didn't get back to us in time. And then that might lead on to, well, now we need to work on, well, we're not going to get angry when they do something bad to us. And so it's taking that next level up. There's always a step forward along the way. In Hebrews 12, 2-7, we read, keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set out for him, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and has taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of God. And so we need to know our direction. This is what Jeremy talked about last week, didn't he, with his feet, Exhort, and we need to know where our feet are taking us. And I've linked that into, I guess, in terms of like physio, we're going to be doing some goal setting. Carrying on, Hebrews 12. Think of him who endured such opposition against himself by sinners, so that you may not grow weary in your souls and give up. You have not yet resisted to the point of bloodshed in your struggle against sin. And so we've gone with, well, it might get better before it gets worse. And that's that cycle I was talking about in terms of the inflammation. There are going to be ups and downs along the way. And carrying on, my son, do not scorn the Lord's discipline or give up when he corrects you. For the Lord disciplines the one he loves and chastises every son he accepts. Endure your suffering as discipline. God is treating you as sons. For what son is there that a father does not discipline? And so we need to accept the guidance given to us lovingly from God. And I've gone with that. Listen to the expert, i.e. like the healthcare person. Lots of people don't, but that's fine as well. But it's better if you do, I guess. And so there's also a lot of distinctions between the pains, and I guess in terms of, so we have that injury pain that we might have, and we also have this pain here it's talking about that we know, I guess, the discipline of God, the pain that is, I guess, is good for us. And so I guess there's a distinction between them in the fact that the discipline of God isn't like the injury pain, but it's sort of the pain of growth. And so that's what we need to be constantly looking forward, looking to progress, to make those adjustments and to not live comfortably with our spiritual injury tagging along with us. The final step we've got is discharged. So we've made good progress along the way on our rehab journey, and I guess they're needing our sort of expertise less and less and advice. And so we've taught them how to sort of self-manage. And so that's what we try and do, so that the patient knows how to keep going themselves at home, and then knowing what to do when it does get worse, if it does, and knowing what to do when to come back for more sort of help or anything. And so what they're doing here, they're in the process of making a habit and knowing these things. And so likewise, we need to keep our spiritual injury at bay. We need to form these good habits. I'm sure we've heard lots of talks about habits before. Obviously the daily prayer, doing the readings, could even be reading as a devotional every morning, or reading a verse every day when you wake up. It could be putting something on your fridge that you're going to see every morning before you go to work, or listening to something on the way to work in the car. And so this will keep us spiritually well and help reduce those flare-ups that might come. It's not always going to be a clear and easy process. There's often those ups and downs that we're going to be talking about. And so in Psalms 1, verse 1 to 2, we read, "How blessed is the one who does not follow the advice of the wicked, or stand in the pathway with sinners, or sit in the assembly of scoffers. Instead, he finds pleasure in obeying the Lord's commands. He meditates on his commands day and night." Our spiritual injury can be healed depending on what it is, but we all have that spiritual injury of sin, which is a chronic issue, isn't it? It can't be healed on our own, only managed. And this is something that we need to work on for a lifetime as we follow Christ. Right, so what spiritual injury do you have? Have you asked God or someone else for help? Have you evaluated the pain with a trusted person? Have you prevented the injury from getting worse? Have you made yourself pliable for God? Have you made healing progress? And then have you discharged yourself? And so we look to Christ now and we think of his physical injuries that he suffered for us and all the circumstances that he went through and yet sustained no spiritual injury. So let's examine ourselves this morning and look to start that healing journey from our pain to having a purpose.